Good.
All right, how y'all doing this evening? I'm Matt, this is Hattie and Wilton. We're going to be talking about hostile takeover defenses this evening. So first we want to talk a little bit about what are hostile takeovers. I'm sure many of you have seen Wall Street and know a little bit about what hostile takeovers are, but essentially it's when an acquiring company perhaps can't convince management to accept their merger offer, and so they circumvent management and go straight to the shareholders and try to get them to accept the merger. They may be looking for all the common stock, or just looking to take a controlling interest. It really varies from situation to situation. While they became very well known in the 1980s, they really have been taking place since the days of Vanderbilt and Carnegie. So they've been happening for a while. We've recently seen an uptick in hostile takeovers, most recently because, for a few reasons. Number one, because FASB decided to no longer require goodwill to be amortized. I would also argue that the cheapness of money also probably had an effect on the increase in hostile takeovers as well. So as we're going through this, we just want you all to remember three things. That not all hostile takeovers are negative necessarily for shareholder value. Management will try to portray it as such, but there are instances where it increases shareholder value. And the merger and acquisitions environment is constantly changing as laws change, tax laws and regulations change. And finally, this is not a comprehensive list, but rather the 8 or 9 defense tactics that we felt were the most important. So we're going to go a little fast this evening, so I can answer any questions you guys may have at the end. First one here is staggered board. Essentially what this does is to create group the board into 3 different groups. So if there's 12 members, there would be 3 groups of 4 people who would all be coming up, who would be grouped into the re-election group, so they would not all be re-elected at once. And what this does, it does not prevent a hostile takeover necessarily, it just delays someone's ability to take control of the board. And so its use has actually declined 25% from the year 2002 to 2012 among companies in the S&P 500. It's about 126 companies or so that still use this. And part of the reason I would venture guess is that many of them include an 80% provision, which requires 80% of shareholder vote to change the corporate charter amendment. And so I think it's lack of flexibility. If for some reason no one becomes viable, it may be tough to change that. It's part of the reason. So it's only a moderately effective tactic. It won't stop, as I mentioned, it won't stop a hostile takeover. It can merely delay someone taking control of the board. So you're going to want to use this defense tactic in conjunction with some other defense tactics. Second one we have here is the supermajority. This is also a corporate charter amendment. It requires an extremely high percentage of shareholder votes in order to approve the merger. So typically that number is 80%, but it can really be whatever management feels is appropriate. Many of these supermajorities have lock-in provisions, meaning that if they want to make any changes to this amendment in the corporate charter, they're going to need to get the same supermajority percentage vote to make the changes or remove it as they would in order to approve the merger. So there can be some lack of flexibility there. It's certainly got its pros and cons. This is also considered a moderately effective defense strategy. I would say that it's definitely more effective in staving off a hostile takeover than a staggered board, in that it makes it a little more difficult, makes it a little more expensive for someone to take controlling interest of the company. So now I'm actually going to turn it over to Hattie to discuss fair price amendments.
Thank you. Okay. And the fair price amendment is one of the sharp repellents that is used as a preventive defense tactic against hostile takeovers. And the provision requires the takeover bidders to pay a fair price, also called a same price, to each shareholders in a tender offer. It is often used in combination with supermajority clause. It is structured so that the violation of this provision invokes the supermajority condition, which in many cases is effectively impossible to satisfy. Currently, a well-known company that has fair price provision is the McGraw-Hill. A lot of us have at least one textbook published by this company. And some people consider the fair price amendment beneficial to shareholder interest because it increases the target firm's bargaining power, while others consider it harmful because this encourages some offers that could be favorable to shareholders. The fair price amendment are considered the least restrictive amendments among corporate charter amendments because it is effectively mainly against two-tiered tender offers, and while the two-tiered tender offers is not essential to a successful takeover. Now I'm getting back to Mac to talk about the famous poison pills.
All right, so if you have heard anything about hostile takeovers, chances are it's been poison pill is one of the things you've probably heard about. So again, it's probably one of the most well-known defense tactics. At its core, the poison pill essentially tries to make it prohibitively expensive for the acquiring firm to take over the target firm. As we've learned in class, poison pill is essentially rights or warrants that the company grants to the shareholders. And so these are worthless basically until the triggering event that we learned about. So in the case of hostile takeover, the triggering event could be if an individual, an institutional investor, or a group of people perhaps own 15 to 30% of the company stock. Once they acquire that, the shares or the rights or warrants are triggered, and it essentially dilutes the company stock. Netflix is a great example. Back in 2012, Carl Icahn was acquiring a lot of Netflix and had made some comments that he would love to continue acquiring some. They were not excited about that, and we talked about Carl Icahn a lot in this class. So they implemented a poison pill. It said basically if anyone acquires 20% of the stock, then it'll trigger the poison pill and become prohibitively expensive for Icahn to continue to acquire that stock. So it is very controversial. It is legally allowed though, however, based on Moran and Household International, which was a case in 1985. The court affirmed previous decisions using the business judgment rule, which again is something that we discussed in this class. However, because it is, even though it is legally allowed, many people view it as being primarily beneficial for management and really detrimental to shareholder value. One of the things that I won't get into too much and have to answer questions on later on just because it's a little bit involved is that there are two types of plans, flip over plans and flip in plans. And so depending on what the company's strategy is, they would implement one of those two plans. So now I'm actually going to turn it back to Hattie to discuss dual class recapitalization.
Thank you. The dual class recapitalization is the issuance of a second class of common stock with reducing voting control in exchange for outstanding shares of common stock. The dual class recapitalization increases voting control of management without increasing the ownership of equity, sometimes even decreasing the ownership of equity eventually. It provides the management continuity, the ability to raise additional equity capital without diluting its voting control. And it also gives the management the incentive to invest in the firm's specific human capital. Currently, the most high-profile examples are some technology companies, including Google's and Facebook's and LinkedIn, etc. The co-founders of these companies believe that they have the dynamic and long-term vision for their companies, so that they need to keep control in order to continue the innovation and remain the industry pioneer. But however, there are critics states that this kind of separation between the voting control and equity is actually weakening the market checking mechanics for corporate controls. Sometimes when the tender offer is defeated, it is actually the common stock shareholders that are bearing the loss of the control premium. Next, we'll move on to litigation. Litigation is perhaps the most common form of post-offer defense in anti-takeovers. There are reports showing that 1 out of 3 tender offers was challenged by litigation defenses. The litigation net generally serves in 3 purposes. Firstly, it buys the target firm time in developing strategies against a takeover while the bidder is preparing for legal documents. Secondly, it is used as it is used for stalling the bidder, and so that other higher offers can be solicited. So, thirdly, it is often used as an encouragement to the bidders to raise the offer price, so that the target firm may drop the suit. Therefore, the bidder can avoid a high legal expense. Common charges employed in anti-takeover litigations include antitrust, inadequate disclosure, and fraud. Intensive empirical studies have shown that litigation is able to extend the negotiation period, which often leads to a higher offer price or a higher probability of a successful takeover. This has a positive effect on shareholder interest, or at least make it a fair game. Now Wilton will be talking about green mail and golden parachutes.
Green mail is one of the measures taken by the target company to stop a hostile takeover. Acquiring company usually just buy a material amount of shares of the target companies on the open market, then threaten the target company hostile takeover. The target company can strike a deal with the acquiring company to buy the shares back with a large amount of a premium in exchange to stop the hostile takeover. Clearly, this move is bad for the shareholders' value. The premium paid to the acquiring company obviously comes from the shareholders' pocket. And for the acquiring company, even though they received a large amount of ransom from the green mail, they still have to pay a high percentage tax on it. It's about 50%. Due to those setbacks, the green mail method is really used recently. So next one I'm going to talk about is the golden parachute. Golden parachute would be another good measures can be taken by the target company to stop a hostile takeover. There are related clauses on the employees' contracts, specifically for the chief management, since that large amount of benefit will be paid to the employees who lost their jobs. Due to those parachute clauses, the acquiring company will have to pay a large amount of money in order to replace the original management team with someone who are more loyal to the acquiring company. This huge amount of money may deter off some potential takeovers, but it's also a two-sided sword. A company only exists in order to increase the shareholder values, but this move, golden parachute, in most cases actually hurt the shareholder values. Shareholder will have to pay the bills in some cases when the employee leaves. And also there is a conflict of interest between the shareholders and the management. Management may be more willing to take the offer to sell the company in order to get their parachute open, and in some extreme cases, management will agree to a lower price offer just to make it happen. Since the management teams are the ones who are actually running the companies, there's not much for the shareholder to do to stop them.
All right, so let's wrap this up real quick. I know we flew through a lot of different topics. People spend decades of their careers becoming experts in this, so it'd be irrational to think that we could hit every individual topic in depth. So, but what we just wanted to convey, I suppose, is that there are many different hostile takeover defense tactics, and that you can combine them, you can use them individually. They are relatively flexible, and it's important to make sure you have a corporate litigator who is able to help you get a good plan together. So just to summarize, the three things we really wanted to convey is that this is not an exhaustive list. There are many different defense tactics out there, and they're constantly changing. With that, number two would just be that the M&A environment is constantly changing with laws and litigation. And finally, it's important for management to focus on the preservation of shareholder value rather than self-preservation, but we're not naive. We understand that many times that those two things are in conflict, and as we discussed this semester, many times that's what the board is there to reconcile. So with that being said, just want to thank you all for your time, and we'll open up to some questions.
Thank you.
At the beginning, you mentioned that there were times where there was a hostile takeover and it actually improved the value to the shareholder.
Certainly.
Do you have specific cases or companies that happened with?
I mean, to answer your question, no, I don't have specific companies, but I will say that a lot of the time, that additional value comes in the form of using some of these defenses to increase the bid price. And so,
Gotcha.
a lot of times, so litigation, for example, Hattie mentioned, in that it allows extended time for negotiation. It can sometimes incentivize the acquiring firm to raise their offer price to the target firm in order to avoid a massive amount of legal fees with it being wrapped up in court. So that's one way. The other way is that a lot of the times when someone wants to come in, everyone's situation is different. I don't know the motives of every single person that wants to take over a company. However, management also wants to keep their job. So that's part of the reason we'll talk about golden parachutes, and that it more so aligns management's personal wealth with shareholder value, which can be used to the benefit or detriment depending on who's in charge. So hopefully that.
Gotcha, yeah, I know what you're saying now.
Any more questions?
Thank you all very much.